I started listening to you, and I started meditating and paying attention to how things feel, slowing down, taking stock before I took action. My life has changed a lot, and things are going incredibly well. And it's very exciting, but it's a little lonely out there, far on the leading edge.
Then what's happening there? Because we've been saying that there's never a crowd on the leading edge, but there's certainly enough to be interesting. What's happening here is you've found a way to consistently stay in alignment, but you don't trust others. So now that you know that they're not necessary to your alignment, you can let more of them in now that you know you're stable. It's interesting, sometimes a little bit of interaction with someone who hasn't quite got it all figured out can cause some more bounces, some more rockets of desires, some more clarification, some more opportunities to uplift, some more opportunities to be uplifted, some more opportunities for clarification. Esther just really recently came into an awesome awareness that even when she thinks about other people, her expectation of others does affect what comes to them. And now that she's so aware of what she's pointing at, she only wants to point as it relates to herself or any other in ways that are beneficial to those that she's pointing about. You see what we're getting at?
Yes.
There's a wonderful woman. In fact, she was the first one. Her name is Audrey. And she was the first one to begin gathering people to come to these seminars in this area. She called Jerry and Esther and said, I have a group of about 50 people that would love to see you. Will you bring Abraham to Rye, New York? And Jerry said, if there's a Courtyard Marriott, we will. And she said, there is. And so Jerry said, we will. And so that was the beginning of this gathering many, many years ago. She is a wonderful counselor. She has many credentials behind her name. And one of the things that she often did, there was a process at the time that we were calling scripting, where you just write a scenario the way you want it to be.
I do this, and it's worked incredibly well.
So Audrey began doing this scripting where she just wrote a story about herself or about someone she cared about or about one of her clients, where she just told the story the way she wanted it to be. And amazing things began to happen in their experiences. So when you hold someone as your object of attention and you think about them and you script about them, law of attraction will bring evidence of your relationship with them to you, and you won't feel lonely. You'll feel integrated. You'll feel influential. You'll feel tied in. You'll feel a part of their upliftment. Because when you are an uplifter, it's so satisfying to be aware of the upliftment that you are emphasizing, yes?
I want to get back to that. I really loved doing that. It felt euphoric to speak these things into being, speak into what my physical body would be like, the homes I would live in, the travels, and so many of them have come true.
Yes.
And I would just start to think bigger and bigger and more exciting, more interesting.
Esther's been playing a game where she takes a sheet of paper, draws a line down the middle, and writes satisfying on one side and unsatisfying on the other. And then if something occurs to her, she just draws an arrow whichever way it points. So let's say that we take the conversation that you began with today, and you talk about how clarity has come to you and your application of this has come to you, satisfied, you're thriving relative to so many things, feeling so good, satisfied, but lonely, unsatisfied. So you draw the arrow that way. Now, take that subject of it's a little lonely out here on the leading edge, and then see if you can find some way of making that lonely feeling or that unsatisfied feeling, that dissatisfaction, feel more satisfying. You might say to yourself something like, well, for a while, I wanted to stabilize, and so I sort of drew into myself. And that was a good decision for you to make when you were feeling a little unstable. But now you could say, I'm feeling so stable, I don't believe that instability could be mine under any conditions. And so now there's no reason to isolate myself from those who might be thinking differently than I'm thinking, because that's the name of this game. Diversity is the name of this game. And we all have something of benefit. Esther was telling someone the other day that she loves the feeling of winning when she's co-creating with someone, maybe a house builder, maybe the car salesman. It doesn't matter who it is, win. And Esther was acknowledging that while she likes to thrive, she likes them to thrive too. And if in engagement with someone, if they're not winning, then she doesn't win, because their winning is such an important part of her winning. Because when you're an uplifter, you want to always be doing that. And that's sort of what we're talking about, isn't it? So while it might have been prudent to withdraw your attention while you stabilized and showed yourself how easy it is for you to thrive, now you've got a different priority, in that now that lonely feeling is maybe pointing you toward the fact that you're wanting to help some others to thrive too. So what we're getting at is this vortex that we talk about, this vibrational reality that you've created. There's all kinds of people that you've put in there. People who you care about, who are in there. You care about them. And so you must find satisfying thoughts about them. And sometimes they don't behave in satisfying ways. Which means you've got to find a way to be satisfied anyway. You can't rely on them to behave in satisfying ways. And that's what makes you sort of want to throw some people out of your experience altogether, because you care about them and they misbehave, and then you feel bad and you think you have no control. But you do. You have control. You can be satisfied about them even when they're misbehaving. You can be satisfied because they're still in the early stages. You can be satisfied because they're still in step one. You can be satisfied because they're filling their vortex with all kinds of wonderful things. You can be satisfied because you know how it works. You can be satisfied because you once were there a little bit. You can be satisfied because you found your way out of it. You can be satisfied because they can too. You can be satisfied because they're really not any of your business except that you care about them. You see what we're getting at? You can bring yourself into satisfaction, and when you do, oh, it's so not lonely, because then you have access to everything. Sometimes people will come and they will learn about what we're teaching, and they'll get really good at applying it, and then they will say something like, but those people at work are so negative. And that's when we really like to begin having some fun with them, because if you need anybody to be different, Esther will say to people all the time, if it was just different, it would be perfect. The sales girl brought her something to try on, and Esther handed it back, and she said, how did you like it? And Esther said, if it was just different, it would have been perfect. There's room for improvement everywhere. That's what this universe is about, and it certainly is what you are about. More.
Can I have a follow-up? So when I'm trying to think about how to spend my time for next week, for example, I could go to Bali, I could go to Tuscany, I could work on a work project in Tennessee, I could meet interesting people in New York City, go to dinner parties and talk about business ideas. There's a lot of choices there. And sometimes I get worried that if I'm spending too much time in New York City at the business meetings and at the cocktail dinners in that mode, that I'll forget about this kind of more peaceful side. And if I go do the peaceful side of Tuscany and Bali, I in the pool or watching the vineyards or something, and I feel like I'm going to forget about the rest of the world and society and the social things. So I kind of swing backwards and forwards.
But here's the thing. As you're evaluating that, it sounded a little human. And it's all right, because there's satisfying factors in all of that. But if you will just remember that you've created a vortex, and your inner being knows your innermost desires. Your inner being knows what you care most about. Your vortex has been pre-prioritized for you. All of the cooperative components have been gathered, and some of them are readier to pop than others. Some of them have greater potential for earlier satisfaction than others. Just like the plants in the ground, some of them are ready to harvest and some of them are just getting started. As thoughts are turning to things, the harvesting factor on some of them is more ready for the plucking than others. So if you just put in your mind mix, what would be most satisfying? What's the most satisfying way I could spend my time? By asking that and really meaning it. But before you do that, we think you'd be very good at it now, but we want to have a conversation with all of you about something really important, and that is, have you taken the time to identify and isolate and practice what the feeling of satisfaction really is. Do you know what satisfying is? Because it's not just relief. If you've had your tongue hanging out with meetings and now you think about going to Tuscany and sitting in a winery and just sipping some wine and looking at the sunset, that might feel like relief, but is it satisfaction? Are you following us? So most of you can feel the difference between relief. In other words, we've noticed about all of you for a very long time. You get focused and things really get rolling, and then you get so busy your tongues are hanging out, and then you say, I need to slow down, and then you get bored. So you go from bored to overwhelmed and bored to overwhelmed and bored to overwhelmed, and you rarely stop in any long phase of satisfaction, but you could. So if you take a little bit of time when you find yourself feeling utterly satisfied to stop and think about, to identify it, and then to isolate it by really acknowledging just how satisfied you feel, and then think about what the cooperative components are that are causing this feeling of immense satisfaction. Once you do that, then all you have to do is ask yourself, what would be more satisfying? Of course, when you're under the influence of your inner being, those thoughts are just naturally occurring to you, but you override them for bogus human reasons. It's like your inner being, because your inner being knows what's in your vortex and knows what's ripe for the harvest and knows where the greatest potential satisfaction right now is. Your inner being will give you an impulse to that, but so often you override it because it's not productive enough for you, or because it doesn't seem quite efficient enough. Doesn't seem like I should go from here all the way to over here. Shouldn't I go here, 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 here along the way? There are so many human factors that aren't good factors. Your inner being really knows the path of least resistance to a steady stream of satisfying moments in time. The question is, and we talked about this earlier with someone here today, do you feel worthy enough to let yourself stay in a state of chronic satisfaction? Do you? Do you? Do you? Do you? Almost none of you do. You feel like you need to pay some price, or you need to demonstrate something that makes you at least appear to be worthy of the good stuff that's flowing. It's a rare one of you who could really say and mean, really know it and mean it when you say it, that you really believe that you are worthy enough, that you should be able to get on a trend, on a trail, on a track of following the guidance from your inner being that just leads you from one wonderful moment to another, to another, to another, to another, to another. Most of you aren't willing to do that because you don't feel worthy of that. This is a big conversation. Now, there's certainly plenty of worthiness going on in your experience, or you couldn't have allowed all the good stuff in that you've allowed in. But there's always room for more improvement, isn't there? And you ask the question of us, and the answer is chronic satisfaction. When you really mean that, then the universal timing that is so interesting just displays itself to you constantly. And that's when you begin to feel maybe a little lonely, because the universe is performing just for you. There's not a crowd of people that were with you that day that hawk swooped down right across your car, right at that moment when you had a thought that the hawk was confirming, but you knew it. You knew it. You were the audience of one that the whole universe is focused upon. Do you feel worthy enough to accept that? Most don't. Most need a big crowd to gather so that everybody could kind of be in on it. The universe is there for you, fulfilling everything that's in your vortex. We like this conversation. Did you get it?
I think maybe I'll hear it better when I replay, but to trust that I'll get the impulse to listen to the impulse. It comes at the right time. The universe delivers at the right time, and to listen and to follow. Stop thinking so much.
And isn't it logical that when you get good at that it's just impulse follow, bam, impulse follow, bam, impulse follow, bam. And that all of the intentions that you hold would be interwoven so that your satisfaction and others' satisfaction are all woven together. You begin to realize that the universe is yielding to you and is playing to this audience of one in this moment. And you don't have to factor everything else in, but everything else is being factored in. Your desire for humanity is part of your point of attraction. Your desire for upliftment of humanity is part of your point of attraction. The demonstration of your success in all the ways. We've said for a long time that the greatest demonstration of success that you could ever offer is your joy, is your satisfaction, you say.